And I found that every single movement that started with violence still continues to this day with violence. So you can't have a violent revolution. And I thought, what a perfect revolution would be is all about peace, all about unity, would require no losers. It would have only winners. It wouldn't require violence. It wouldn't require intimidation or force. It wouldn't even require taxation. It would simply require that we advance a plan as our representative of what we stand for. And what is it we stand for? Marijuana people stand for one love, unity, cooperation between the races, cooperation between the sexes. We're the most, non-classist oriented group there is in the world. When you pass a joint, everybody is welcome. I've never seen someone say, no, you're gay, you can't smoke with us, or you're black, you can't smoke with us. Never, ever seen it. We're easily one of the most open, benevolent cultures ever. I'm going to tell you that the world owes the pot people. By the time you're through, you'll understand that the world owes the pot people an enormous debt of gratitude that they cannot possibly, the straight people of the world, the prohibition of the world, cannot even begin to appreciate what we have given them in the last 50, 60 years. Because the world has been made a great, beautiful, wonderful place by the contributions of the pot culture. The people of the marijuana culture have given more to the world than any other group. I'm not saying the Chinese don't make a lot of stuff, but they don't invent anything. They don't invent anything. They're not smoking pot in China, and they don't invent anything. They don't smoke pot in Sweden, and they haven't invented anything since the bulb. Right? Okay? The people that are conscious, that invent great cutting-edge things, are mostly North Americans that smoked a lot of pot. It's amazing. When I get through it, you'll be totally, utterly convinced. Everything that's great in the world today came from a pothead speaking English in North America. It's amazing. And it's a consciousness that's developed from our culture of being cast. And here's the thing. 20 years ago, the situation looked bleak, and I thought, I've got to come up with some way that we can generate millions and millions of dollars. Because I looked at other movements around the world. I rejected the violent ones like the IRA. But I looked at the gay liberation movement. I thought that was fascinating. Because what they sought to do was recreate a structure. They wanted media. They wanted their own newspapers. They wanted their own radio shows. They wanted their own propaganda, as it were. And they wanted their own clubs where people could hang out together. And then they wanted parades. And then they wanted acknowledgement and normalization from the rest of the community. And they wanted to be respected. And I thought, well, that's an excellent model to go for. Because they had a legitimate point of view. They're practicing a peaceful, honest lifestyle that ought to be accepted for what it is. And that's what we do. We're a peaceful, honest lifestyle. And we're hunted down like animals everywhere on earth. So I thought, well, if people sent me millions of dollars, and I sent them all these seeds, they would grow, hopefully, millions of plants throughout the world. And this would lead to the defeat of all the armies and police agents and everybody around the world who has to destroy all these things. And I said, eventually they'll realize they're being run ragged. That thousands and thousands and thousands are simply eradicating year after year after year an unbelievable number of plants that they could possibly never retire. They could never defeat that kind of behavior. And then with their money that they sent me, I would give it away and subvert the democratic system to fight the drug war with peaceful, honest efforts by people operating in the democratic sphere. And that's what I've been doing for 20 years, and it turned out to be a huge, great, brilliant idea. And that people sent me millions and millions of dollars, and I gave away, from 1994 to 2005, I gave away $4 million to groups to challenge in the Canadian Supreme Court our marijuana laws. I paid for the challenge in 2003 that we lost. 6-3 in the Parliament. By the way, the six judges on the Supreme Court that voted against legalizing marijuana were all the Anglophone judges. And the 3 that voted to legalize marijuana were all the Francophone judges. So never ever say anything bad about Quebec. Because they were with us when it counted. And then those white Anglo bastards. So remember, and they're all crotchety white males too. But then again, so was the Senate. And the Senate in 2002 said we should legalize marijuana for everybody over 15. Because the Senate interviewed 627 witnesses, and that's what they concluded from everybody that was worth listening to, is that pot should be legal for everybody over 15. Because to criminalize it would only create problems. They realized that even if young people shouldn't have pot, they're so curious and determined to get pot that if we don't make some reasonable allowance for them to get it, they will simply do things that are more unsavory to get it than if we let them have it. And that's the bottom line. So, my name's Marc Emery, and I'm going to jail very shortly for 5 years for selling these seeds. And I want to reflect on some accomplishments that I've done in British Columbia. First of all, when I came here in 1994, there was no movement as I understand it today, like certainly not the way we see it today. And there really wasn't much magic or aura around British Columbia pot. That term BC bud didn't quite exist in that term. And here's one thing I'd like to say. It's a boast. I'm not going to boast much. But you know what? In 15 years, there's not a single individual in this province of British Columbia who's brought more money to this province than I have. Not a single one. Not Jimmy Pattison, and he's a billionaire. He has not brought the money to this province that I have. Because this province produces, they say, $7 to $14 billion every year in marijuana. And it's been at least $4 to $5 billion a year since I started in 1994 heavily marketing and heavily promoting BC product. That's what all the seeds were about. I was on every major media. I still am in all major media, promoting British Columbia marijuana, the lifestyle, the whole kind of environment that people associate with British Columbia has come virtually exclusively through my promotion in 15 years. When you think about it, it's hard to think of anybody else from British Columbia that ever shows up on TV promoting our marijuana or promoting our culture or promoting our industry. I don't want to say I monopolized it all, but I've been pretty well responsible for most of the promotion about BC pot in the last 15 years. So when they send me off to jail, and they are sending me off, because it was either take 5 years now or face 35 or 40 years next year, because the DEA is saying I'm one of the top 50 most wanted in the world and the most wanted drug target in all of Canada, bigger than Hell's Angels, bigger than anybody. And when they use hyperbole like that, you know you're not getting the low end of the sentence if you're actually trying to fight them in court. They were on Lou Dobbs saying I'm responsible for 1.1 million pounds of marijuana worth $3 billion. $3 billion. That money comes all to British Columbia. You know, it's funny that the DEA says it's worth $3 billion, right? And that I agree. I probably brought more money to this province than any other human being alive. But think what this province would have been without me. Because it's impossible for anyone in British Columbia to imagine what would it be like in our rural environment, our rural areas, without that money. Like, it's easy for us to throw these figures around, but let's say I was never on. I never came to BC. I never promoted BC pot as special, and it never got to the size it was now. Let's say it was only $4 or $5 billion instead of $7 billion. Over a 15-year period, that's like a $20 billion shortfall in revenues that would have gone to our rural areas. And Vancouver's doing fine because of the Olympics and because we're a major commercial center. Vancouver doesn't really need the money that comes from the pot industry, but the rest of this province does. Because the rest of this province had a bubble burst ages ago. The fishing bubble burst 15 years ago. The mining bubble burst 15 years ago. The lumber and logging bubble's always been bursting. Up and down. We've had so many periods of unemployment in the rural parts of British Columbia that if it weren't for marijuana, a lot of those places would be ghost towns. Certainly places like Nelson and Caslow, and all the places in the Kootenay town are totally reliant on the marijuana crops in the fall and indoor crops to survive. There's no other jobs out there. There's nothing in those places other than tourism. But the fishing's dead, the lumber is dead, the mining is dead, and to a large degree tourism is off in these areas. Without marijuana, our province would be devastated. So I'm happy to say, and you can think about this, and if you can come up with anybody who's made more money for the province of British Columbia, you let me know. But that, I think, is one of my greatest achievements, is I'm responsible for billions and billions of dollars to having come to British Columbia. So when I'm gone, I want you to think about that. Because it's too late to reverse. This province will continue to make money long after I'm in jail for all the work that I have done. And in my political realm, that's just an accumulation of my promotion over 15 years, and I've promoted so much that this province has benefited by billions of dollars. But I think, on one hand, I want to tell you this in a personal way, because this is what I haven't told the rest of the country, is that I think it's been very insulting for me to actually have to go through this process of fighting City Hall for my license, considering how much this city is a reflection of my character after 15 years. I mean, Amsterdam is a term that's used all over the world to describe a rather glorious, wonderful place. Amsterdam on the Pacific, somewhere, and Amsterdam itself is such a very beautiful, wonderful place that if you can ever get the public to believe that we're as benevolent and as peaceful as Amsterdam while being on the Pacific, that's a tremendous thing. The whole idea of Amsterdam has been perpetuated around the world, and it means so many great things to people everywhere. It means freedom, first and foremost. Vancouver's always been associated with freedom. But the concept of Amsterdam is freedom and tolerance, just like it's known in Holland. Except a lot of people can't go to Holland. Holland's far away. They speak different languages there. People come to Vancouver, and it's like an oasis of freedom. And everybody around the world knows this. Every day people tell me this, man, it's wonderful to come to Vancouver. I feel free. I feel free coming here. Well, how did that happen? Who are the people responsible for the environment that we live in? I like to think I'm very responsible for that. When we live in freedom in Vancouver, we're a reflection of the people who made it this way. How did we get this way? Why is it like that here and not anywhere else? And so when I'm gone, I want you to reflect on the city you live in a different way than I've told other people throughout the country, because I can't say I've influenced the people in St. John's quite as profoundly as I've influenced people in my hometown. And yet at the same time, my wife will have to struggle with getting the city council to give us a business license because I have a conviction for passing a joint 5 years ago. We've got to go through all this horrible inconvenience and enduring this ridiculous bureaucracy threatening me with my livelihood being taken away from me. I feel like saying, are you kidding me? This city council owes me more than anyone else in this whole city for the reputation you've got with tourists, for the money that comes into this province through marijuana, to the fact that British Columbia's primary product is known throughout the world as marijuana before anything else. That's all me. I said, you would actually humiliate me and make me come beg before you to get a business license to operate one of the most efficient, properly run businesses in the history of this city, and certainly considering the neighborhood I'm in, it's insulting. And I wanted to tell you that because if they continue to give my wife a hard time while I'm in jail in the United States, I want you to vociferously and forcefully let City Council know that you support that business, that cannabis headquarters at 308 West Hastings Street. And it's a very vital and important aspect of this city's history, let alone its culture. Because Vancouver, Vanceville, is marijuana central. There are more potheads here in Vancouver than anywhere else in North America, and there's more political awareness. One of the things I'm also really proud of that I did in this revolutionary period is I helped create a whole bunch of leaders. One of the greatest things I think people are going to look back on is not necessarily the accomplishments I made, but who did I inspire to take the mantle and go forward and do great things. And so many of the people who have accomplished things in Vancouver, like the first Compassion Club was run by Hilary Black, who was my first manager and one of my protégés, to the cannabis dispensaries run by Dana Larson, my editor of 10 years. One of the greatest activists this country's ever had is David Montmolevine, who went to the Canadian Supreme Court, and David was tutored under me as well. And so on it goes from the people who run Vancouver Seed Bank Terra, worked for me for years, and most of the major aspects of our culture are people who saw my example in the 90s or worked under me directly and are now leading things all across this country. So I'm doing a little boasting here before I segue into the other aspect, and that's I'm going away for a long time, and it's hard to imagine having this baby, this thing cultivating, this overgrowing of government, this revolution I've been doing for 20 years, kind of like now in your hands, and in my wife's hands, and in the hands of other people. Because we're an incredible group, but we're maligned in spite of, it's just fantastic. For example, you're never going to get Alzheimer's disease if you smoke a joint every day after the age of 52. It's pretty fantastic. And yet it's really relevant to me because my mother died of Alzheimer's disease last year and she would not smoke marijuana once because her doctor didn't tell her to do it. And so she wouldn't do it. So she died of Alzheimer's disease. But we're a special species of human beings. All mammals have a cannabinoid receptor like bears and deer and dogs and cats. They get off on cannabis. If they eat it and consume it, their body will feel good. But bears and dogs are not sentient creatures. A dog's not going to decide after having a lot of THC that he's going to become vegetarian. It's about time. Right? They don't think like that. They have no capacity to think or make decisions. They're just animals. So the animal simply feels good, like we do when we smoke cannabis. But we as human beings have a special extrasensory aspect to our brain, and that's conscious volition. We make decisions. We can think. We have thoughts, sentient ideas, that go from A to B to C that can logically move forward that aren't based on instinct. And that, of course, is ultimately the secret of why marijuana is illegal, too. And we'll get to that. But we have a cannabinoid receptor in our brain. And it's true. If you don't use it, you will lose it. And that's what happens. We get Alzheimer's when the cannabinoid receptor in our brain begins to wither away. But if you feed it with just 3 puffs a day, 3 little tokes a day, you'll feed your cannabinoid receptor and you will never get Alzheimer's. You check the research. By the way, everything I'm telling you is true, and you can Google it. Just put cannabis cures cancer when we get to that, or cannabis cures Alzheimer's, or anything like that, and you will be shocked at the number of peer-reviewed studies that verify what I'm telling you. Because not only do you not get Alzheimer's, and that's quite something really, because Alzheimer's, we have a lot of that going on. As we get to an aging society, more and more people are getting Alzheimer's, but not the pot people. You'd think that would be trumpeted as one of the greatest things ever. Stop Alzheimer's. It's a cure. You can reverse it. It actually stops it dead in its tracks. It will not get worse once you start smoking cannabis, but you don't hear from anybody. You will never get you'll never get lung cancer or any respiratory cancers as long as you just smoke marijuana. There's not a single. We have over 40,000 people in this country every year getting cancers of the lungs from nicotine. And not a single person, year after year, and I've smoked for 30 years, and I know people who smoke for 40, 45 years, and they never get cancer. Not a single doctor's coroner's reports ever said this person died from smoking cannabis. Doesn't happen. And people think, well, how can that be? You're taking all that smoke, and in fact, when you do a bong hit, you get your lungs full of air. You're doing a big favor to your lungs. You're getting healthy. Because what happens when you do a big bong hit, for example, is you now have 3 to 4 times more air in your lungs than you normally would. Now, normally you can't do anything with extra oxygen. You would just exhale it, because as your lungs go back to normal, you exhale it out. It can only absorb. But when you take THC in a big bong hit, the THC acts exactly opposite nicotine. Nicotine, for example, you don't even have to smoke nicotine. You can chew tobacco, and you're going to get cancers of the tongue, of the esophagus, of the larynx, all sorts of bad things happen just by chewing tobacco. Because what happens to nicotine is that if you think of your veins and arteries like straws carrying blood and oxygen back and forth, and remember, blood and oxygen is everything to your body. Everything is in that blood and that oxygen. So when you have your arteries affected by nicotine, they get narrower and tinier. So the blood struggles to get through these narrower passages that are now constricted, right? And so eventually, over time, you choke off blood and oxygen to the affected tissues, and they die, and you get necrosis and cancers and tumors and bad things. And when you smoke nicotine, that's what happens. The arteries that take oxygen get tinier and tinier, so your lungs are always struggling to get more oxygen in there that they're not getting, that they're being choked out from nicotine. But cannabis is the opposite. It's a vasodilator. It opens them up so that when you take in 3 to 4 times more oxygen, your lungs can actually deliver 3 to 4 times more oxygen to all the affected tissues. And that's why, if you're smoking marijuana regularly, whether it's bong hits or through a vaporizer or joints, you're never going to see your lungs darken to the degree that you're going to get cancer. Because what happens, not only are you getting lots of oxygen and keeping healthy, but then the THC goes across all the cells of your lungs and attacks and shrinks, and reduces the size and breaks them up of all cancerous tumors, old tumors, necrotic cells, and dead cells. So basically, it's eating away at these cells that are not healthy, crunching them down, and then you exhale them or expectorate them. It's the most amazing thing. You're never going to get Alzheimer's as long as you smoke after 52, and you're never going to get cancer of lungs and of the respiratory system. But there's more. Look at the people. We've got an epidemic of Crohn's disease today. It's kind of a bowel wasting syndrome. Every single person with Crohn's disease swears that marijuana calms their bowels down. My friend Michelle described Crohn's disease of eating a bag of glass and then going to the bathroom and trying to get it out. Right? She's hurtful, bloody, painful, and it ultimately takes years off your life. She swears, as does everybody else with Crohn's disease, that cannabis calms the bowels so that life can go on as normal. But don't stop there, too. People with multiple sclerosis swear by marijuana as a way, because what happens with multiple sclerosis is that signals jump over cell division. So, for example, if I wanted to move my finger like this, when you have MS, you go like this because the fingers don't get the signal. The signal jumps all across all these little borders within your body and affects everything so that you're always shaking like that. Cannabis allows those things to actually function so that you actually get the signal. You stop going blind when you smoke cannabis when you have MS, and the same way that you also stop going blind if you've got diabetes and you're going blind. And cannabis has an amazing potential to help people, to cure people, to assist people with devastating ailments. And I see this time and time again from people with spasticity, from epilepsy, to depression, to fibromyalgia. I've seen people swear by the benefits of cannabis every day of my life. Now this gets really interesting because, wow, we're talking about how awesome it is medically. Why would such a thing be illegal? Why would we be hunted down like animals for stuff that's clearly good for us? Now that's a really interesting thing because everything that's legal is going to kill you. But the one thing that won't kill you, and believe me, there's almost nothing in nature that won't kill you. Right? Everything can kill you if you consume it the way I've discovered it, except cannabis. You could not eat or consume cannabis fast enough to kill yourself. I've never seen anybody pathologically have cannabis as the cause of death. It's never happened. I've always waited for it. Because if there was one example of somebody who got cancer of the lung from marijuana, every government doctor would have that holding up, and a big poster would be everywhere, and we'd see this kind of thing all over the place. But there doesn't exist any such thing in science or nature. There are no people dying of marijuana. And look at what's legal. Alcohol. Alcohol's promoted, it's legal. You know, you can buy a bottle of Jack Daniels and it will kill every single person in this room if you drink it in 24 hours. And there's not even a warning on Jack Daniels. There's not even a warning on a bottle of alcohol. If you consume this, you could kill yourself. It happens all the time. 12,000 people die of alcohol in this country every year from out-and-out alcohol toxicity. Not to mention all the people that kill themselves in cars when they're drunk, that get into fights when they're drunk, that draw a gun when they're drunk.